Hello learners, I am Dr. Munish Kumar Bharadwaj from School of Engineering and Technology of IGNOU. If you remember, we were discussing about the seasoning of timber. In our last lecture, we discussed about the natural seasoning, and now we will continue with the discussion on artificial seasoning. Just to recall what we covered in the natural seasoning. Natural seasoning is the seasoning which is done by the natural air. In this method, timber is cut and sawn into suitable sections of planks, and these timber pieces are stacked horizontally or vertically and left for seasoning. A stack is protected from fast blowing wind, rain and excessive heat of sun by covering it with a roof of suitable material. This method is simple and inexpensive, and it doesn't require skilled supervision. But this method is very slow. Drying of different surfaces may not be even and uniform. Attack of fungi and insects may be there if not properly attended. It requires more space, and drying may not be to the desired level. These are the limitations of natural seasoning. Then what to do? Then answer is artificial seasoning. So what is artificial seasoning? What are different methods of artificial seasoning? How it is done? That we will discuss here. First of all, reasons for adopting artificial seasoning. You know that natural seasoning was having certain limitations. And to overcome those limitations, this artificial seasoning may be adopted. So whatever limitations were there in the natural seasoning, these will be overcome by this method. So the reasons for adopting artificial seasoning are that defects such as shrinkage, cracking, warping, which may come in the natural seasoning, these are minimized here in the artificial seasoning. So here drying is controlled and there are practically no chances of attack of fungi and insects. Drying of different surfaces is even and uniform. It considerably reduces the period of seasoning. As you know that natural seasoning is very slow and it takes lot of time, but here the time is small and it is reduced considerably. There is better control of circulation of air, humidity and temperature. So in artificial seasoning we can control the circulation of air as well as its humidity and the temperature also. Here wood becomes more suitable for painting, gluing and other such operations. Wood with desired moisture content may be obtained by artificial seasoning, whereas in natural seasoning there is a limit to that. Now, what are different methods of artificial seasoning? Different methods are, first of all, boiling, second one is chemical seasoning, third one is electrical seasoning, fourth one is kiln seasoning, and last one is water seasoning. What are these different methods? We will discuss one by one. Let us begin with boiling. This is a very quick method, and in this method of artificial seasoning, what we do, timber is immersed in water and water is then boiled. Timber is boiled with water for about 3 to 4 hours. It is then dried very slowly. The period of seasoning and shrinkage of timber are reduced by this method, but it affects the elasticity and strength of wood. So this is the limitation here, and very important limitation of this method, where we are boiling the water and putting the timber there in the boiling water. So the limitation is that it affects the elasticity of the timber as well as the strength of timber. In place of boiling water, timber may be exposed to the action of hot steam. So there is an option. So this method of seasoning proves to be costly. Now we move to chemical seasoning. This is also known as salt seasoning. In this method, what we do, timber is immersed in a solution of suitable salts. It is then taken out and seasoned in the ordinary way. The interior surface of timber dries in advance of exterior one, and chances of formation of external cracks are reduced. Now we move to electrical seasoning. In this method, high frequency alternating current is used. Timber, when it is green, offers less resistance to the flow of electric current. The resistance increases as the wood dries internally, which also results in production of heat, because more resistance means more heat will be produced. Easy flow of current, less heat will be produced. So this is most rapid method of seasoning. But here the initial cost as well as the maintenance cost are high. Now we move to kiln seasoning. In this method, drying of timber is carried out inside an airtight chamber or oven. The process of seasoning is as follows. Timber is arranged inside the chamber such that spaces are left for free circulation of air. Air which is fully saturated with moisture and which is heated to a temperature of about 35 degrees to 38 degrees centigrade is then forced inside the chamber by suitable arrangement. This forced air allowed to circulate round the timber pieces. As air is fully saturated with moisture, evaporation from the surface of timber pieces is prevented, because this may cause problem. The heat reaches inside the timber pieces. The relative humidity is now generally reduced. The temperature is then raised and maintained till the desired degree of moisture content is attained. Depending upon the mode of construction and operation, kilns are of two types, namely stationary kiln and progressive kilns. A stationary kiln is also known as a compartment kiln, and in this kiln, process of seasoning is carried out in a single compartment only. Means one compartment is used for the seasoning. Drying operations are adjusted as drying proceeds. This kiln is adopted for seasoning timber which require a close control of humidity and temperature. It gives better results. In a progressive kiln, timber travels from one end of the kiln to the other end, and in doing so, it gets seasoned. That's why its name is progressive kiln, because here the timber is moving, traveling. It is used for seasoning timber on a large scale. Kiln seasoning, though it is costly, but gives well seasoned timber as it controls three important conditions. What are these three conditions? Circulation of air, relative humidity, and temperature. These three things are controlled here. Now we move to water seasoning. In water seasoning, the procedure is as follows. What is this? First, timber is cut into pieces of suitable sizes. These pieces are immersed wholly in water, preferably in running water of a stream. Care should be taken to see that timber is not partly immersed. The thicker or larger end of timber is kept pointing on the upstream side. Timber is taken out after a period of about 2 to 4 weeks. During this period, sap contained in timber is washed away by water. Timber is then taken out of water and allowed to dry in free air. Water that has replaced sap from timber dries out and timber is seasoned. Water seasoning is a quick method and it renders timber which is less liable to shrink or warp. So that way it's a good method. It also removes organic materials contained in sap of the timber. It, however, weakens timber and makes it brittle. This is the largest, you can say, limitation. Now we move to classification of timbers with respect to seasoning. That with respect to seasoning, how we can classify timbers. Depending upon the ease with which Indian timbers can be seasoned, they are divided into three groups. What are these three groups? First one is non-refractory timbers, second one is moderately refractory timbers, and third one is highly refractory timbers. What are these? First, let us discuss non-refractory timbers. Non-refractory timbers can be rapidly seasoned without any trouble. They can be seasoned even in the open air and sun. For example, Devdar, Semul, etc. These are the example of non-refractory timbers. Now, let's take moderately refractory timbers. These timbers have tendency to split and to crack during seasoning. They are therefore to be protected against rapid drying conditions. An example of such timbers are mango, rosewood, sisu, teak, etc. Now we move to the third category, that is highly refractory timbers. These timbers are likely to be damaged severely during seasoning. They are difficult to season. Examples of such timbers are axlewood, hopia, laurel, sal, etc. The cost of seasoning of timber will naturally depend on the thickness of timber and type of timber with respect to seasoning. It will be more for highly refractory timbers and less for non-refractory timbers. The period or time for seasoning of timber will also vary with thickness of timber and type of timber with respect to seasoning. Here you see a table which gives you the time required for seasoning of different timbers with different thicknesses. Here in second column you see the type of timber, and third, fourth, fifth and sixth column it gives you the thickness of the timber pieces in mm. So for example, for non-refractory timber, for a thickness of 12 mm it will take 6 days, whereas a piece of thickness having 25 mm will take 8 days. Similarly, thickness of a piece of thickness of 38 mm will take 12 days, whereas a piece of thickness 50 mm will take 17 days. So that way, for the same timber, that is non-refractory timber, you see that with the increased thickness, the number of days also increasing for seasoning of the timber. If we look at the moderately refractory timber, the different time period for the different thicknesses are: for 12 mm 7 days, for 25 mm 10 days, 38 mm 14 days and 50 mm 18 days. For highly refractory timber, similarly, for 12 mm thickness 9 days, 25 mm thickness 12 days, 38 mm thickness 17 days and 50 mm 22 days. So here you see the variation along with the type of timber, that time is varying, as well as for the same timber the time of seasoning is varying with the thickness of the piece. Now we move to the inspection of timber members. Inspection of timber is carried out by experienced staff using visual and hammer testing. Ultrasonic testing with PURL means portable ultrasonic rot locator, and confirmation drill testing are subsequently carried out. Subsequently carried out means after visual and hammer testing. You can go for these tests. Radiographic testing of splices can be carried out, but if safety of public is ensured, because radio waves are involved in this, so public safety should be ensured. The PURL testing is carried out at the points where fungal attack is most likely. Drill testing has been traditionally used to test timber members. However, this is both time consuming as well as destructive in critical areas. Drilling is carried out only where the presence of fungal decay or termite attack has been identified. The one area where ultrasonic and hammer testing is unsatisfactory is the zone between cover or splice plates and the joints. So here in this zone, ultrasonic and the hammer testing is giving unsatisfactory results. These are particularly critical areas because of the property of fungi to enter the timber through the end grains and notching effect on the timber and further damage to timber caused by corrosion of plates. Ultrasonic testing is unsuitable for identifying decay at places where the steel plates, bolts, etc. are present, while the continued drill testing will weaken the timber. Now let us look at a case study that how we inspect the timber and what remedies may be done to rectify the problem. Here a case study is taken. In one of the housing project, the doors and windows were provided with jungle wood called the country wood. The door shutters provided are of panelled and battened. You can see the section and elevation in the figure here. This is the figure. You see the plan and the elevation of shutter and section also at AA. So this is the plan and elevation and the sectional elevation of the frame for door. Now this is giving only the section. So from here you can see that thickness of different parts basically, but the defects are not visible in this figure particularly. What defects are there? I will tell you that on inspection and the observation what defects were observed. On observation what we found, that there were some merits and there were some demerits also with the wood which was used for this particular purpose. Let's begin with merits. It is economical because of jungle wood and thin sections of the timbers are used. It is durable, being a timber as compared to the particle board and fiber board, because particle board and fiber board are not durable in comparison to the timber. So this frame was made of timber. So in comparison to particle boards and the fiber boards, this is durable. Then appearance was also good because of the battens and the grooves. Basically battens and grooves were provided, so appearance was good. Then what were the demerits? Being a jungle wood and thin section adopted, all battens warped and joints shrunk, giving through and through gap in joints. It is unsafe as all the battens warped and gaps developed. Due to warping, shutters could not be closed properly and thereby tower bolts, locking bolts could not be bolted. This was the major problem due to warping. Shutters became practically impossible to use. So there was no use basically. When you are not able to close the shutters, so there is no use of the panels or the shutters. So what are the remedies? Rectifications or repairs done were that the shutters were removed and all the battens separated. The battens which could not be repaired due to their warping or twisting, these were replaced with new battens. The battens which could be straightened were reused after the following rectification work. What are these? The battens were soaked in required quantity of chemicals like SQ and then seasoned. means the treatment was done and then it was seasoned. While seasoning, the battens were kept on leveled surface and loaded with sufficient weight for 2-3 weeks. After the release of weights, the battens found to be straight. Then the same were reused and shutters were fixed. All the shutters now working fairly and satisfactorily. Now there are some suggestions here. It is very important to keep in view that the thickness of battens for panels shall not be less than 20 mm, as the lesser thickness of jungle wood warps very fast. So if you are using the jungle wood, so note this suggestion. It should be ensured that the timber before use is properly seasoned and chemically treated, so that there is no warping and also there is no attack of fungi and other insects. Decayed timber should not be used at all. Timber having too many knots should not also be used. Warped timber members should not be used, as they will be subjected to further warping. Timber shall be stored away from damp wall and damp earth. Place stones or concrete blocks on damp earth and place the timber over stones or the blocks to avoid absorption of moisture by timber from damp earth. Also keep the timber at least 300 mm away from damp walls. Also avoid use of sap and unseasoned wood. Any amount of repairs for such wood will not yield any good result. If you are using such wood, then whatever treatment you do, there will be no use. You will not get good results. By adopting proper seasoning method, defects like bow, carp, twist, etc. can be minimized. Timber having large knots of diameter greater than 40 mm, continuity of wood fiber is broken. Thus, timber will be weak. Timber shall be chemically treated both while kiln seasoning as well as at site of work by dipping the wood in a tank filled with required chemicals. Nowadays, industrial timber is much in use. It is manufactured scientifically in a factory, and such timber possesses desired shape, appearance, strength, etc. These are veneers, plywood, fiber boards, particle boards, straw boards, etc. These industrial timbers does not normally require any repairs of defects except carpentry repairs, as these are manufactured scientifically in a factory, keeping in view the defects, chemical treatments, etc. So, through the 3 lecture series, I have discussed with you the repairing defects in timber, in which I covered preservation of timber, then qualities and requirements of a good preservative, then types of preservatives, then application of preservatives, how these are applied, then I talked about fire resistance of timber, then seasoning of timber, then inspection of timber members, and lastly I discussed a case study with you, that how to observe the defects and how to rectify the defects. I hope you must have enjoyed this topic. So thank you.